Welcome back, everyone. We're talking now with Gail M. Sullivan, a first-time candidate for the Haverhill School Committee. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you.
Tell me, what was the reason that caused you to decide to run for the Haverhill School Committee?
Well, I've been an educator all my life. My mom and dad were educators, and I have been a teacher and a principal, an assistant superintendent, and a superintendent, and I was very busy. And then I decided to stop and work part-time, so I teach at Northern Essex Community College.
Which course do you teach?
I teach basic reading, and I decided that what I'd like to do is volunteer and do some other things. So I decided I would volunteer and serve on the school committee because I have vast experience in budgeting, finance, special education, curriculum, school improvement, assessment, and I thought I might be helpful.
You have quite a background.
Yes.
Can you tell me what are some of the changes that you would like to see or that you would like to present or promote that might better the Haverhill school system if you happen to be on the Haverhill School Committee?
I'd really like to have a vision of excellence. I'd like to see the schools go from good to great. I'd like more long-range visioning than I see now, both in facility planning, special education, and achievement. How are we going to move student achievement? I think that MCAS scores are one indication of achievement, but they're not the whole picture. There are many other things. But if one were to look at those, one would think that there needs to be quite a bit of improvement. So I would really want to have a long discussion of how do we move these good schools to become great schools, and what are the steps that we would have to go through to do that.
What are some of the steps, in your opinion?
Well, I think you have to support teachers. You have to talk to teachers about why isn't achievement better, because they have the knowledge of why it isn't better. And perhaps they would like to do a better job and they're missing some resources or some training or some technology in order to do a better job. So I would really like to listen to the teachers. I'd like to listen to the parents and what their concerns are. But in general, there's a lot of really great research on what are effective teaching strategies, but not everybody knows what they are, and effective uses of technology. A lot of times schools just buy technology because it's what's popular, or it's everybody has an iPad, so let's go out and get iPads, without thinking about it's a tool and how are you going to properly use that tool. Sometimes it's like going out and buying 500 hammers without figuring out what you're going to do with the 500 hammers. So I think you have to have a lot of really good training as to, well, you have the tool, what's the most effective way to use the tool in order to support student achievement?
If I'm not mistaken, in years past, when the MCAS test was implemented on a statewide basis, many teachers voiced a degree of frustration because they thought that they were essentially, their methodology of teaching was totally revamped to basically teach to the test, teach to the MCAS test. And as a result, their criticism was that there were many other factors, very, very important factors, that were falling by the wayside because they were teaching to the test. Has that changed, or is that sort of sentiment still out there, do you think?
I think that that's a very popular sentiment in this state or any state in which schools went from no statewide standardized testing to really high stakes testing, and it's particularly high stakes in Massachusetts because you can't graduate from high school unless you've passed. So that really ramps up the value of it and how people look at it. So I would say there's still frustration. I think what should be worked on is a conversation about what do you want students to know and be able to do, and then the methodology you use to get there is open to what you are best at. So I don't necessarily agree that you have to teach the test. You have to adhere to a standard. Any profession ought to have a standard. We all hope that doctors are adhering to a standard and they all learn standard information. So I think there has to be some kind of happy medium so that I don't think that the MCAS is the only indication of how well our students are doing. It's an indicator.
Because you have statewide mandates with guidelines that you have to follow that takes out of the realm of, let's say, individual cities and towns and being able to teach the way they think they should, because they've got to be on this track, and there's some benefit to that. But do you see that as all a stifling measure in any regard, in comparison, in your experience with what you've learned or what you've read about educational systems elsewhere in the world and how successfully they've been implemented? And are there any things that we might be able to learn from them that you also cite that could be implemented into the Haverhill school system without compromising the common track that we have to be on?
I think a lot depends on the school leaders and what their interpretation of doing well on the MCAS is. So if you're a principal and you want people to drill and kill, and you think that that's a way to ensure good results, then that can have a stifling effect. But if you have a principal who thinks that good teaching is good teaching, and as long as the standards are what you're aiming for so that students can read critically, they can think critically, they can write well, all of those broad standards that we would want for any of our kids, and then you believe that if you teach well and have rigor and teach critical thinking, then kids will then do well on the MCAS. You don't have to do a whole bunch of drill and kill. So I think a lot depends on the leadership and what their interpretation of how one is getting ready for those tests.
You know, it's interesting. You talk about critical thinking, which apparently in a nationwide study on education within this country, not just the state of Massachusetts, found that that was an absolutely critical factor that was lacking in virtually every school system in the entire country, and that was the capacity to teach students critical thinking.
Right, and that I think that's partly because we've never made a concerted effort to teach teachers how to teach critical thinking. It happens accidentally or it happens by happenstance, whereas there's a discrete group of skills that are involved in critical thinking that one could teach to teachers before they become teachers, but that isn't part of what they learn usually.
Because the system takes it for granted that the students should automatically know that?
The system takes it for granted that the teachers automatically know that. And for a long time, it was the teacher was the presenter of content, and the students were the consumers of the content. And we were not necessarily thinking about, well, now that they have the content, how do they think about it? How do they synthesize what they have? How do they analyze what they have? And in an entrepreneurial world and in a global world, those skills are more and more important. So we need to teach those. But I think that if you talk to teachers about that, encourage them, help them learn how to do that, then they would, because teachers want to do a good job.
That's excellent. I appreciate your being here. Gail M. Sullivan, first run for Haverhill School Committee. Thanks very much, and we wish you the best of luck in the election.
Thank you very much.
We'll be right back.